Welcome to the Gwenton Show. Today we've got an amazing guest with us today, a very good friend of mine, a crime fighter.
The sad thing is that Lewisham Police and most of the Metropolitan Police Force, they're still relatively extremists when it comes to, say, people like me being crimes. And this here is a man who's got the power anyway. So he's the person that's actually applying strategic punch to the police in negation of people like me. And in fact, today I was here because of an injunction where I have to notice on this being contravened, whereas the High Court judges are saying the police must engage. The police are refusing to engage and perverting the course of justice.
The one and only Tracy in the building.
God, the one and only. I suppose I am the one and only.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
Viewers, I've had to literally use Uber to kidnap her to get her here.
And I'm sorry I'm dressed like this. I'm scruffy today because I was doing my legals in the Brazilian cafe.
So, the reason why I've invited you up today is this. Some of the stuff that I've witnessed over the past few months is borderline unbelievable. And I'm going to use that broadly.
Yeah.
I've been the past 2 days telling some of my friends about a police officer being arrested.
Yeah.
And they refuse to believe that. And last night I was coming back and speaking to a friend and something he was saying to me, and I said, I've got a friend that actually arrested a police officer, and the police officer attempted to escape the court 3 times. And I was like, you know what? Tracy needs to get this out there, because even myself, and I'm happy to admit that, when we first met, some of the stuff you was telling me, I was like, how do you go around getting warrants until you even summons me to court? I got a summons come through my door, and then I realized that it was real. So what I want to start off with is, first and foremost, is what got you to the point where you then started learning law yourself? Because the amount of stuff you know, someone will think you've gone and studied law and qualified and sitting on the bar.
Well, firstly, the reason why I sent you a summons was I didn't want to make you feel left out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I know. But I went through a living hell for the past 15 years, and it still hasn't stopped. And I basically, from the injuries and everything I've suffered and the beatings I've had and everything else, from every single establishment, I've had to learn everything on my feet, and because it's the only way to stop something. The only way, being trans, there are no solicitors in this country. There's a token few, but there's no solicitors in this country that wants to touch a trans woman. To an extent now that even the police, they don't like LGBT people. The extremism which is being brought out in these special measures actually highlights major issues, but I'm starting to question what these special measures are, because it's a bit like having a public inquiry for Grenfell Tower. You know, it just sweeps it under the carpet, and it's like, put your hands up and say, yes, we've done wrong, and then try and cover up as much shit as you can. I had to learn very quickly. I was being maliciously prosecuted by the police. I was being arrested constantly.
Is that for the attempted murder? Remember, you was on the attempted murder charge?
It was something crazy, and I was in a position where, in that case, we actually demonstrated, and at one point, because there's no evidence, we asked for all the evidence to be struck out, and the CPS have brought in some new evidence. I was on my way to Belgravia police station to bed. The inspector.
Yeah.
It's better I'd not name names. So anyway, in this prosecution, I we wanted everything struck out because there was no evidence. And so we added to it, saying it was also impossible to behead a police officer. And so the judge looked at me and asked me, why is it impossible to behead a police officer, Miss Smith? And so I said to him that, Your Honour, how can you consider what's on the average shoulders of a police officer as a head? Because there's nothing between the ears.
Yeah.
And then I picked up my hairbrush, held it aloft, and I said, and this, Your Honour, was the murder weapon. He basically, he was trying to chew the side of his face off just to stop laughing. And he then told me a joke in open court. And I replied, and after that, he just dismissed the case because there's no evidence. So did he dismiss it on the fact that, technically speaking, it was impossible to behead a police officer, or did he dismiss it because there's no evidence? That is a questionable area, you see.
That your airbrush wasn't actually a machine gun?
Or a machete.
Okay.
But technically speaking, you see, obviously we said there was no evidence, and also that you couldn't technically define what's on the shoulders of a police officer as a head in the first place. So did he dismiss the case? Did he strike it out? Because it's impossible to behead a police officer. Yeah. But anyway, he's struck out because there's no evidence. I'm just trying to be a bit humorous. But yeah, so police beatings, police everything. Deprivation of civil liberties, because I was complaining about being deprived treatment because I was trans. I'd suffered some severe injuries and I wasn't being treated for them.
Yeah.
And no one was helping me. Even at one stage I had social services sitting on the side of my bed whilst I was bedridden from all of my injuries, telling me to commit suicide because life was never going to get any better for me. What can you do? You're totally vulnerable to everything, open to the elements. So all I could do was keep on learning law, keep on learning and finding a way to actually start fighting. So the past 15 years, I've just done nothing except every day I've gone and fought for my rights to exist in this country.
But when I met you, you was more fighting for other people. I think over the past 12 months, you focused on self, and actually, they might as well give you a room in the courts, the amount of days you're up there. And for me, as someone, I've been in and out the courts myself, whether it's helping other people or getting justice for myself. But one thing that I did see, and not on just one occasion, but now twice, I've never seen judges laugh before. I didn't know you could actually make jokes with judges until I attended your 2 court hearings where you had the judges laughing to the point where they knew it was border unprofessional engaging in
I wouldn't say
those
that.
jokes.
It's just that with court hearings can be very sort of boring. It's laborious, and we're all human and we all laugh and joke at work, and there's no reason why you can't have a little bit of a joke. It's like the old cliche when someone says, "Can I ask you a question?" and you say no, they're completely stuffed, aren't they? So when the senior judges in that last hearing asked, they said, "Miss Smith, can we ask you a question?" And my response was no. Yeah. It was meant as humour. And when he realised, you saw his reaction, he screwed up his face and stuck his tongue out at me.
Yeah.
Why can't? I think in a way sometimes it's the human element that we need to bring back into things, because then we can start living in harmony. And I think there's room for everything. And these people, these judges, they are very highly intelligent. They are. And I praise every single judge I've been in front of so far. People only knock things when they don't get their way. But if you do the work on you, seriously, you need to do the work on you. You need to start learning things. It's like your civil liberties. No one knows what their civil liberties are anymore. And it's very simple. For your rights to freedom of enjoyment under the law, you have to allow others the same. But it also means that you have to be aware of those laws.
Yeah.
And the reason why we can laugh and joke whilst going through is because my cases have a lot of power and a lot of strength behind them and are valid. I wouldn't be in the courts if the judges decided that I didn't have a case. So from that respect, it's yes, when something is said, why not just not have fun, but just be human and just have a little bit of a joke.
One of the things I wanted to ask you is, not one, I've got two. How do you get an arrest warrant for a police officer?
Well, you don't unless you go to the courts and actually provide. That would be very, very hard to do because you have all of these other organisations that there's systems for that the officer should be investigated through. But technically speaking, those systems are there to deter people.
Okay.
Because we have something called rule of law. And let me ask you, if rule of law is defined as law is there for the ruler as well as the ruled, who holds the ruler to justice if the ruler commits an offence?
Yeah, has to be the person.
It is the ruled.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, this is why I say, for instance, under PACE regulations, there is something called PACE Section 24A, which is an arrest without warrant.
So is that like a citizen's arrest?
Yeah. So, but it's for indictable offences only. It's not for, he said something horrible to me.
Yeah.
There has to be something really damn serious, like perverting the course of justice.
So for you out there watching, don't get ahead of yourself and start using the PACE stuff.
Yeah, read law first.
Yeah, don't go around arresting people for no reason. Serious.
You see, I bought this laptop in so we can look. And I can't name names or anything on this, and I can't disclose the information on there. But you see that injunction order.
Yeah.
You see on this injunction order, it says if you do not obey this order, you will be guilty of contempt of court and you may be sent to prison.
Sent to prison, yeah.
Well, because I had breaches under this injunction order, and because there's a penal warning on there, it means that the authorities must get involved, even the judges. Every hearing, they're saying, Miss Smith, you must involve the, you must engage with the authorities, mainly the police.
Yeah.
But you see, when police officers refuse to actually engage with you and refuse to actually acknowledge this court injunction order,
Yeah.
then there's a very serious issue. And it's an issue where one could actually see this as perverting the course of justice and obstructing justice. And the way I see things, and there is room under rule of law and under our uncodified constitution, and that is if a police officer decides on his own merit to obstruct that injunction order,
Yeah.
one could actually say that he is perverting the course of justice, which is an arrestable offence.
That's for limited knowledge that I know that being taken to court for perverting the cause of justice is a very serious offence.
Yes, and especially on this, because technically speaking, because they're refusing, or they refuse to, there's another aspect in this, would mean that they could be interfering with my court administration.
Okay.
They could actually be in contempt of court themselves.
And is that
perverting the course of justice?
Is that for not receiving it or not passing it on to the person? So let's say then
for not investigating any breaches under that injunction order. And this is where I decided that I'd arrest the police sergeant I summoned into the case on the 11th of January.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I did it in the court because it's all under court record.
Yeah.
So technically and formally, this police officer could actually be at large at the moment, so I'm going to take it further.
So when you get one of these and you want to serve them, how do you serve it?
Well, technically speaking, this order is not for the police.
Okay.
But it's, as you can see down here, it's against the defendant.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So the difference is...
So this is a civilian.
So it says basically here it's forbidden, whether by himself or by instructing or encouraging or permitting any other person to harass in any way, or assault verbally or physically, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, because it does say up here that if you do not obey this order, you will be guilty of contempt of court and you may be sent to prison. Well, that's a penal warning. And as far as the judges, well, every single judge I've been in front of so far says I must actually involve the
Local
police.
authority. Okay.
But you see, if the police refuse to actually recognise that, or if officers refuse to investigate under that, that would be considered to be perverting the course of justice or obstructing a court injunction order, in my case, which could actually be considered as contempt.
So to get a police involved, what will be the process?
Well, you report the crime under the injunction order.
Okay.
And I think you've seen for yourself that so far only one police officer has actually recognised that order as criminal.
Yeah.
So this is where the problem lies. Even our police forces are starting to not recognise court orders.
But that officer was a sergeant, so he's probably been around for a while and understands what it is.
Yeah. Well, since they left Wetherspoons.
Well, my thing is, I don't think a PC or just a normal officer would understand this.
Well, sadly, they have to. It's they're bound to know law.
Okay.
Which is the absurd thing, because I had this not so long ago where a police officer said to me that there was over 11,000 laws. How are we meant to know all of them? But I have to know them all.
Yeah.
We as citizens have to know all of these laws. But they don't have to. It's a bit absurd.
Yeah.
Under our civil liberties, we have to live within the law. Right? That includes all law. And yet police officers don't seem to want to know any law or haven't been taught any law. In fact, they haven't even been taught how to actually act as police officers under, say, for instance, Section 124 of the Police Act, which refers across to which almost makes the College of Policing Statutory Code of Ethics statute.
Yeah.
So why have we gone from a police force that acted ethically to a police force that knows nothing and just wants to base every single crime on a word rather than actually even recognising a court order?
Wow.
There is definitely a war on vulnerable people.
So if I was just a normal lay person out there,
Yeah.
and don't believe that legal aid is going to do it for me, I haven't got the money to go private, how would I start to learn?
Well, it's like me. I learned all of the because I wasn't being treated on the NHS or anything, and I was being discriminated against, and so I started learning all of the legislation and protocols and service guidelines that were attached to my treatment.
Yeah.
And technically speaking, it says, for instance, that it's unethical to deprive the availability or eligibility of, say, for instance, hormone therapy.
Okay.
And then it goes on further to say bridging endocrines are to hold from harm. So if it says bridging endocrines are to hold from harm, and a doctor doesn't want to actually prescribe you those, the doctor is prescribing you harm. So then you can start looking at, say, for instance, what harm is that causing? Because technically speaking, that would be an abuse of office. That would either be misfeasance or malfeasance. There's a difference. If someone abused their office ignorantly, that would be misfeasance. If someone abused their office on purpose to cause harm, that would be malfeasance.
So with the GP, would that be civil or criminal?
Well, it depends which way you want to take it, but you see, this is another thing. You can bring any law into a civil case, but if you bring, say, for instance, criminal law into a civil case, it's called tort.
Okay.
And so it's like on this case, I've brought in a lot of tort law. My case is basically under tort law.
Yeah.
So you're bringing in criminal acts into your civil prosecution.
So is it like an unorthodox approach?
In what way?
With someone that has gone and sat on the bar, would they use this same approach?
Yeah, but there's big problems, because what I've noticed is that, especially in criminal prosecutions and stuff, people are doing something. I've gone in and acted on various people's behalves, and I can't say which court it was or anything, but there was one particular guy. He was 79 years old. He had the first signs of dementia, and also he had heart failure, and he was being prosecuted for obstructing a court order, and the poor guy had dementia.
Yeah, I remember you saying.
Technically speaking, that guy should have been safeguarded by the local authorities, but instead what they want to do is criminalise the guy, because he's got all of these assets that they can strip from him.
Okay.
It's all about grabbing money now. So I went in as a witness. He was representing himself, and I was alarmed at this because this guy has dementia. And so I only said one thing as a witness, and that was that this guy was not fit to stand trial.
Yeah.
And the instantly the judge blew up, and he told the jury to ignore my words because I was not professionally qualified to determine that this man was not fit for trial. So I managed to get in as a reasonable adjustment to represent him in his sentencing, because he was very ill at the time. So when I went into his sentencing, I reminded the judge of his words to the jury to ignore my words because I was not professionally qualified to determine was. Oh, sorry, you'll have to bleep.
We'll do later.
That he was not fit for trial, and he agreed that he remembered his words. And then I reminded the judge that nor was he professionally qualified to determine that he was fit for trial, so he prejudiced the case. I was holding him in contempt of court.
Okay.
This was in Crown Court level, and I'd forced my way in under a reasonable adjustment to be his legal representative because he had no legal representation. And Article 6 defines that he must have legal representation. So the judge had no alternative but to actually give 6 months leave to appeal. I can say that. Yeah, bleep. So he went home to his 83-year-old wife rather than going to prison for 5 years.
Okay.
And I've done a lot of this.
And again, if you look at that, an 85-year-old person you're trying to send to prison to
And
do
he was
what?
79 years old.
Or 79. What are you going to
We're
prison
going to
to
send
do?
him to prison for 5 years. And then what they were going to do also with proceeds of crime, strip his assets.
I think that's the main thing.
He'd been an honest guy all of his life. He'd made a couple of mistakes and he didn't know. He didn't know what he'd done. And because, you see, the council coerced him into committing these offences, because the first thing you do when you have someone that's vulnerable is that you actually try and safeguard that person away from committing offences.
Yeah.
But no, they were hell-bent on actually prosecuting him for obstructing an injunction. So I actually went after the prosecution as well for contempt of court.
Okay.
And at that point, I actually then got hold of the Bar Council and Queen's Council, demanding that I formally interviewed the judge with Bar as witness because of the Bar Handbook. As far as I'm concerned, practice something called content-free law, which
Yeah,
is
I've heard of it,
unconstitutional. And this happens on a regular basis. Content-free law would be something like it's illegal to sleep under a bridge. It's illegal to beg on the street. And it's illegal to steal a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Well, that covers what's called procedural fairness. The law is there for all. But it also enshrines discrimination and inequality in law. And the reason for that is what sort of person lives under a bridge? Is it a millionaire?
A poor person.
A poor person. And so a poor person will be out on the street begging, and a poor person will be desperate.
Stealing a loaf of bread, yeah.
So you see, technically speaking, what happens is we have what's called an uncodified constitution. And so within that uncodified constitution, it cannot actually coerce people to become criminals. So it has to take away the necessity to commit an offence.
Okay.
So that's where safeguarding comes in for John. And also you can't, with the police do all of the, I've worked with homeless organisations on this, and in fact up in Camden, the homeless used to say that Tracy's giving the police dispersal orders, because technically speaking, if you're forced to live in a doorway because there's nowhere else for you to live, then you can't exactly give them a dispersal order, because where are you going to disperse them to?
So
another doorway somewhere else.
Across the other
Exactly,
bar.
it's unlawful. Whereas, technically speaking, we have all these safeguards in place, and so I've literally combated hordes of police officers that go out in big groups trying to move on all the homeless. I've actually gone out there and stood in front of them all, and by the time I finished, they've dispersed and left the homeless where they are.
Yeah.
Which is so sad, because they should safeguard these people, take them in and get them in a safeguarding meeting the following day. But that doesn't happen anymore. It's a big game, and it takes up a lot of police time, and that time could be used for
something else, yes. But I've saving and preserving life.
So you see, content-free law, and this is, can I use the FUCK word for a second?
Beep.
Right, okay, so I say beep.
Yeah.
For reference to whoever's watching this, when I say beep, it's FUCK. Just put that in your head.
Beep.
I had a very good teacher that in equality law, which got me started. And he basically said, if you say WTF, then you're being discriminated against in public services. And people need, you need to sort of like calm down and think about how you're being abused. And then you need to work out and break all of that down, take out all of the baggage, right? Because the baggage masks everything else. So you must try and keep a clear head. There's no one that's ever helped me. I have to do all of this myself. And so I've come up with very complex cases. And most of the time, my cases are way outside the square. It's never in case law. And it's absolutely ludicrous. So, and it becomes interesting for the judges, because all of a sudden they've got something new and fresh.
But how is it for you filing? Because even though people are hearing this, they don't understand that you have to also go through certain procedures that other people have to go through. People might think you don't have to follow the same processes that other people have to follow, like the filing and all of that stuff. How is that for you?
Of course you do. There's particular ways of filing. You know, if you need the courts to, say, for instance, compel someone or forbid someone for undertaking an act under an injunction order, then you would go in under, say, for instance, a Part 8 application.
Okay.
And define your case on a Part 8 application.
Yeah.
See, this is a problem, because police officers would rather walk along this road. They don't walk along the streets anymore. They go around in hordes in vans, don't they, to protect themselves.
Yeah.
But you see, if they'd actually taken the trouble, it's like me. I have learned so much law. It's ridiculous. That case I was talking about in that court with the old guy, I had to become fully conversant with the Town and Country Planning Act. Again, I have to know everything from housing, Town and Country Planning Act. But one thing that amazes me is that solicitors, both criminal and civil, right, you have specialised solicitors. And this is another major issue in this country. And that is, if you were subject to, say, for instance, discrimination, then you would have to go and find a specialist solicitor in equality law, yes? No, you shouldn't have to. Because technically speaking, solicitors and barristers are classed as a public function because of your Article 6, right to justice in human rights. It makes all law firms and law practices and solicitors and barristers an actual public function. And they have to provide access for everyone to get into their firms.
Even if they're not legal aid?
You have to provide equality in law.
Okay.
Right? The Section 149 of public sector duty
Yeah.
is listen to people's needs within and give due regard to those protected characteristics. Those solicitors are bound by that. But when you start talking to solicitors, most say, oh, no, you need a specialist in that, although they must be specialists in this themselves.
Yeah.
So when you look at what's going on, most solicitors don't like equality law, which they should be preaching in every case, in every field. Because if it relates to if it relates to some wrongdoing, technically speaking, if there is some discrimination, they must bring it in. But as far as saying, this is where it's all going wrong. You look at the state of the country. Why is it that, say, for instance, there's just a fresh UN report out that now actually puts the UK 3 countries lower than it was before in the deprivation and abuse for trans people. Now, as from last week, we are now far more severe in the UK against trans people than, say, in Russia or the Middle East.
I don't know, why is that? Lack of understanding?
Well, it's very interesting how, you see, when you look at that alone, would you be able to tell me why there's so much abuse against trans people?
I think for me, and this is just from my understand, I think a lot of people just don't understand. And when I say understand, it's like me and you. You're my friend. I don't even look at you as anything but Tracy, my friend. Other people that don't understand it, that people have their rights to live their life, it then builds that whole barrier of, oh, you're different to me. And I think a lot of religious scriptures have caused a lot of problems as well, because it then preaches or pushes things that if you don't follow what the scripture says by living your life as freely and happily as you want, you're different, or
I agree with you on this, but
wrong.
you're also wrong.
On what part?
To answer your question, not many people have heard of Chelsea Manning.
Yeah.
And Chelsea Manning was a trans woman known as Private Manning, who actually forced the withdrawal of US troops out of Iraq.
Yeah.
She was then spent 7 years in solitary confinement for her actions. Now, Chelsea Manning's free. She was put back in prison because she refused to testify against Julian Assange. But she's free now. Now, technically speaking, she saved hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives.
Okay.
Now, you imagine if she went and moved to Iraq, she'd be put down a hole and stoned to death. No one would ever thank her. She would be stoned to death or murdered instantly. You wouldn't go to Iraq as a trans person. So there's something a bit bleeped up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going back to this country, the thing that's missing is law. The reason why there's so much discrimination is because of our institutions. You think about it. If every time I was, say, discriminated against, I could successfully report a crime, then if every trans person could do that, then people would learn that they can't do what they are doing to trans people.
Yeah.
Likewise, at the moment, if you look at, say, for instance, all of these protected characteristics, race, gender, religion, I won't say what my religious beliefs are, but one could say that if you believe in God, you believe in aliens. But at the same time, you see, if you look at how things are being weaponized, it's like, because we have equality law now, everyone seems to think that their protected characteristics has the upper hand over another.
Yeah.
Whereas our equality law actually defines our civil liberties.
Okay.
Being for your right of freedom of enjoyment under the law, you have to allow others the same.
Yeah.
But it's not working. Everything is being weaponized. Societies are being driven apart. Rather than societies actually sitting down and thinking why we are being marginalized.
You've also got troublemakers, because we have to call out what we've been a part of recently, where we were invited to a private meeting. We were led up the garden path about an event. And when we went there, it wasn't what we were told the day before. It was, if anything, if I'm being honest, the way it was made to look like you was the troublemaker, and I'll tell you how. So we've gone there. The organisers of the Pearl Drag Queen fiasco didn't want you to speak. One, they didn't want you to go and have a fight with the so-called football hooligans across the street.
I went and spoke to them like normal human beings.
But this is where we come back down to again. They thought you were going to be attacked by the football hooligans. Nobody.
They weren't football hooligans.
Well, that's what they told us. So sometimes we've got people in the community that pretend to do things for the right reason, but when it comes to it, they're also doing it because of their own whatever it
narrative.
Is. Yeah.
Well, they're activists and they're trying to control situations. And at that drag thing, I you know, there's only one thing that I would actually stand for, and that's everyone has a right to go to work. How that was LGBT orientated, because a drag queen can be mainstream, can be anything.
Yeah.
Anyone can put on the other sex's clothes and stand up and do a show.
Yeah.
You know, so it was not LGBT motivated, but yes, it's interesting with the amount of Do you know what interests me as well is that, you know, how we interacted to a ridiculous level, where with, say, for instance, what you were going through, and how we actually created that, and now we seem to engage in a lot of things and got to get a lot of things done.
Yeah.
We just see each other as each other, and each other's there if the other person needs them. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all live like that in a society?
I think it takes time as well. And one thing that I've learned, a lot of people think they've got so much time on this earth that they've got time to be distracted. And we haven't. Even just waking up today is a blessing in itself, much less to carry around hate in your heart for anyone.
I was abused to a ridiculous level. I've been sexually assaulted twice. I've been beaten up by police officers, God knows how many times. I was left to die from my injuries, and I saw so much suffering around me that it upset me what I saw. More so what I was seeing than rather myself.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something about it, so I did. And we set up a suicide prevention platform, which went strong. It's still going strong. We did a lot of things for vulnerable people, and also I realised, and this is going back to one of your questions, was why have you done so much for other people?
Yeah.
Well, you can look at that at both from a couple of angles, but I wasn't confident. I was confident, but with the amount of emotional baggage that was attached, I realised it would have been a big mistake for me to actually do my own legals at the time. Not even a solicitor do their own legals. I'm forced to. And I realised if I couldn't do it for myself, there's some lyrics, some song lyrics, and it's, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for someone else.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it for someone else, do it for the world. But
is that Michael Jackson?
No. It was Stevie Nicks.
Oh, okay.
It's have I something, I can't remember the title of the song, but has anyone ever written anything for you? And it's so true though. And we seem to be in this self-centered, orientated world with so many distractions around us now that we've forgotten there's someone else, and we've forgotten the world. We're just tribal now. We're just tribal. We seem to look at computer screens all day. We don't look around us, and we always moan about things. And it's like last year, there was a job I was doing, because I'm a builder mainly. And there's this guy who's off the rails, alcoholic, drugs, everything. And all of his neighbours were moaning about it and everything. And every time he came out, he'd say something, and I'd have these outrageous conversations with him. Eventually, got to know him so well, we went over the park, sat on a log, and I started talking to him about his addictions. And I said, look, I'll be here for you if you want to go into rehab. And I said, and in the meantime, Brandon, you're spilling your beer. And he says, well, why are you telling me about me spilling beer if you're trying to get me into rehab? I said, I'm not. I said, I'll be here. Because someone has to want to do something. You can't drag
force them, yeah.
And so it's just a waste of beer. If he's not going to give up drinking, he's spilling it all over the grass. But I was there for him. And the interesting thing is that within about 2 months, I had him in rehab. And now he's totally clean. And he's fighting like hell, trying to get a life back whilst fighting everything inside him that's trying to drive him back to the drug and the drinks. Whilst his neighbours, and his family, this is what I find unbelievable. We need to start becoming community. We need to start listening to each other. We need to become each other's mentors. We need to start looking at one another as human beings. We need to be there and embrace each other.
Yeah. What a way to end the show. And for me, what I would want to ask you, apart from love thy neighbor, as I'm someone that's big on that, is this. We know you're talking to movie directors. Some of them are scared. They're like, Tracy,
Everyone's scared of what
we've had one of the country's top movie directors. We're not going to say his name because he'll probably start shivering. Following this case, and sometimes me and him travel back on the train, and he's like, you couldn't make this up, because some of the stuff that we've seen hanging out with you, I don't think Netflix will even show it.
That's the problem, isn't it? Everything is either because the amount of fear that's been being created over the years, that when you get a rogue like me that goes in and arrests a police officer in front of a judge in a Royal Court of Justice, everyone says, even the barristers I was talking to said that's the ballsiest move I've ever seen in our entire lives. And yet everyone's petrified of actually holding other people to account.
Yeah.
Then we need to, one thing I've learned in life, and that is knowledge is strength. Right? Get that knowledge. Do the work on you, and you will become stronger. You will become better, and then the right people will come at the right time.
What a way to end the show on such a powerful point.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, I'm going to give you your last point. For anyone out there watching this show, because this is the opportunity of a lifetime here, if you are someone that want to follow Tracy's journey and document it, get in contact with us, because believe me, this is an opportunity of a lifetime.
Do you know, I think one of the problems is everyone feels alone. And I wrote something not so long ago on the basis of an author's words, and it was Wayne Dyer. And because I do feel that because we're all disenfranchised, that everyone feels alone when it comes to things like this and haven't got the confidence. And he says, you don't have to be lonely if you like the person you're alone with. Become that person. Become the person you want most in your life. Become that person by doing the work on you. Now, obviously, the way things are going in this country and the way we are slowly having things stripped, we can all sit there throwing our rattles out of the pram, or we can do the work on us, become stronger, become better. And perhaps then we will be the right people.
We all have one life. Let's live it in love. Thank you.